Very happy now to be joined by our offensive line coach, the venerable Bill Callahan. 40 years, by the way, congratulations on 40 years as a coach, 25 in the NFL. That is quite a feat, quite a feat.
Yeah, appreciate that. Been fortunate to be around a lot of good players and a lot of good organizations, and God willing, I'm hopeful that I can do it a little bit longer.
Yes, and we're certainly very happy to have you here, which brings me to my first question, which is, we understand why the Browns wanted you. Why did you choose to come and join Kevin Stefanski's staff and be a part of the Cleveland Browns?
Yeah. Well, I've been watching the Cleveland situation for a number of years, and the acquired talent, Baker Mayfield, the Nick Chubbs, Myles Garrett. And then of course we played. We opened the preseason with the Browns, and I was really impressed, with the skill positions and what they did here. That missing piece was the offensive line. I know they didn't have quite the year they wanted, and I felt that I could contribute. I could make it better. And so it was the system. It was a good system fit, a good staff fit. And the main thing is I'm with a bunch of good guys. It's a really good staff. I love Kevin. Alex Van Pelt has been around for a number of years. He's tremendous to work with. And you got guys like Chad O'Shea, who's been around winning football for a number of years. And then obviously, the assistant I have in Scott Peters, it was great that I could bring him in on board. And then some of the other guys, Drew Petzing, and Stump Mitchell. Now, I'm really excited to be with this group of guys. It's a good crew, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
How often is it that you find a staff where you've got your head coach, you've got your offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach, you've got your offensive line coach, and you have a wide receivers coach, all of whom have called plays in the NFL and been offensive coordinators? Is that pretty rare?
Yeah, it really is, but what I really appreciate about our staff, Nate, is that all of our coaches have no ego. They're just what we do to some extent. Everybody has to, but in terms of knowing your role and how to function within the realm of the staff, it's really, really positive. I've been on staffs where there's been a lot of chiefs, and everybody wants to do something, but that's not the case here. This is really a real positive step, and it's great for me to be around. So I get to sit around and observe. And I told Kevin when I got here, I don't need any titles. I don't need anything. I just want to coach the line. And he respected that. And that's really my thrust, is really to help those kids up front.
Well, he may have said, look, you may have said you don't need anything. And he said, well, I'll see that and raise you Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills before we even play a game. That's a pretty nice way to start your tenure here, I would imagine.
Yeah, it really is. Really fortunate. I think our personnel department's done a great job. Andrew and his staff acquiring Jack Conklin and targeting him early in free agency was huge. And then, I can't say enough about our scouts and what they did and the work that they did, to really delve into Jedrick Wills and find out everything they needed to know to make the pick happen. So, yeah, it was like I'm sure you've heard, it was a collaborative effort, but I'm so impressed with our personnel department and what they've been able to do.
It seemed to be universally praised pick getting, obviously, Jedrick Wills in the draft. Of course, Jack Conklin, an all-pro right tackle. You can't argue with that.
No, so, you got to have good players, right? I mean,
absolutely.
The great coaches I've been around have great players.
They say sometimes, is that the chicken or the egg? Well, you know what? Everybody gets the credit when you're winning, which is what everybody hopes happens here in Cleveland. Let's talk about Jedrick for a second, because the big question is, of course, can he play left tackle? And I know you were with Tyron Smith when he made that transition. Mm-hmm. What's the most important aspect of making that transition for a young player like Jedrick Wills?
What's really important is the mindset and the wanting to go over there and take on some of the best pass rushers in the league. And that was Tyron's attitude. He didn't care where he played. You could put him at guard and he would have competed. And I was just telling our local media when I just got off, we were talking about who he compared to in my career. There was a guy out in Oakland by the name of Barry Sims who wasn't even drafted, that beat out 2 first-round picks and became that left tackle for us for the Raiders for a number of years. And Jedrick reminds me of him, probably a little bit more athletic, but just that mindset of going out there and competing. I think his mindset, his makeup is right. And I would tell you that his intangibles, they show up in tangible ways on the field.
Yeah, which is a good thing, which is why you get drafted. You hear your name called 10th overall. From a technique standpoint, you don't get to be there. You don't get to have your hands on him. How are you guys going about this technique transition where he's doing everything? He was kicking with his right foot first. Now he's got to kick with his left foot on the left side. So how are you guys able to do that in this environment?
Well, it's a great question, and we've conquered that so far. He's out drilling, sending tape back, video back. We're sending it to our video department. They're putting it on the system. We're looking, and we go back and look at it together, where we could actually slow it down instead of being on an iPhone or a tape. So it's been really positive. I've had a lot of fun with it. I've done it in the past with players, so it's really no big deal. But it's great that he has the desire to go out every day and work his craft, and wants to get better, wants to learn from some of the best in the game that have done it. So his want to is really high, and if you have one thing that you can start with, it's that. He's got the intrinsic makeup to really wanting to be good. So hopefully I can help him, and maybe Joe Thomas can help him as well. So I would welcome that.
What's that like for you when Joe Thomas, obviously a legend in this town, going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame, and he's literally losing his mind when the Browns select Jedrick Wills. He was obviously, that's who he wanted, and offers up his help. How does that, when you have a legend like that, how does that work? Do you guys talk to you and Joe talk, say, hey, look, this is our program here, but we appreciate your help. How does that kind of come to be?
Yeah, interesting enough, his agent, Joe Panos, was a former player of mine at Wisconsin. So Badger at heart as well. So
right.
He spent 5 years at the University of Wisconsin, and he knows a lot of the people that I know as well. So, I welcome that. But, just to have Joe around, he's welcome to any meeting, any practice. He's always welcome. I mean, I would welcome him. And I would tell you honestly, I've learned more from players than I have from other coaches in my career, because the players, they're there every day. They have some unique perspectives on line play and techniques and things of that nature. But man, how cool is that you can have a future Hall of Famer right in your backyard, be a resource for your first round pick, because he went through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's awesome. A guy takes unbelievable notes and had this. We did a segment on this show with Joe where we went through kind of, his process pre-snap, and he had about 40 things that he would check off every snap. And you say, okay, so they're the ones that have great athletic ability, right?
Sure.
But they're the ones that master the mental aspect of the game. And when you have both, that's when you get a guy who's going to be wearing a gold jacket like Joe. But that work ethic is something that's critical.
It is something. I was around Alan Faneca when I was in New York, and it was great, just to visit with him and talk, because he'll be in the Hall of Fame someday. And just to pick his brain about what he felt was really important. And he would tell me, he said, Bill, the game is 90% mental. If you can master the mental aspects of the game, you can anticipate what's going to happen and put yourself in a position for success. And I couldn't agree more so. And I'm going to take that. That'll be with me my whole life. And I tell it to the players every place I go. So hopefully Jedrick picks up on that pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Well, right next to him, he's going to have the next two guys over, both very intelligent players, and two guys that they didn't have to go out and search for a center or a left guard for you. You got two great ones, Joel Bitonio, multiple-time Pro Bowler, J.C. Tretter probably should have been. What's it like to have those veterans in your room who have been here, been a part of the Cleveland Browns organization?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome. Draft day, I was sitting in my office here at home after we had picked Jedrick. And the first text I get is from J.C. Tretter. He wants to reach out. He wants Jed's number so we can reach out, welcome him to the group, answer any questions he may have. I mean, who does that, really? Yeah. I mean, and does it immediately. So that speaks volumes for J.C.'s character and what he's all about as a player. But I heard of those things about him when he was in Green Bay from people that I know. So it doesn't surprise me, but even Joel, has reached out and helped our younger players, not only after the draft, but now they've been integrated into the team meetings and the position meetings. And now those guys are taking them under their wing a little bit.
So we talked about Jedrick, we talked about Jack, we've talked about JC and Joel. The question when people are looking at, okay, what's this line going to look like day one? Right now, it really seems to center around right guard. And you got a couple of young guys there, Wyatt Teller, Drew Forbes. What have you seen in your study of them? I know Wyatt played more last year, very athletic. For me, the one play I go to is in New England where he basically did a karate roll and then got up and pancaked somebody, which I found to be stunning for a man of his size. But what do you think of those two young guys? I know you haven't got to get your hands on them, but do you feel good that they can be that right guard for this team?
Yeah, I'm very, very eager to get on the grass and work some technique with them. Everything we've been doing in the classroom has been technique oriented and scheme oriented. So they're seeing the things that I would like them to do, and they're eating it up. They're having fun with it, as we all are. But there's nothing like getting out there on the grass and drilling it live. And, who knows how it's going to all shake out. And we're hopeful that they all have success. And then you have a guy like Colby Gossett, who's in the mix too. And then really right. I mean, it's always interesting how we talk about one player, but then there's always that surprise guy that comes out of nowhere, that becomes the starter. So who knows where it's going to end up. I don't have a depth chart yet. I'm hopeful I can make them all better and that they all have success.
That certainly would be the plan. And then you talked in your press conference with the media about just how important it is to have a good swing tackles, good veteran backup. You've got two guys who have started a lot of games in the league, Kendall Lamb right now, as well as Chris Hubbard. And I know you have a big affinity for Chris, and a guy who started here for a couple of years and clearly made it very evident, I think, through his actions. He wants to be a part of this Cleveland Browns organization with what he did restructuring his contract. Yeah,
absolutely. And my hope is that I can elevate his game and take it to a different level and help him. I've had the good fortune of being around that type of player who's been, he's right on the cusp of being the full-time starter. And then obviously he takes a step back. He gets a chance to observe and watch and help listen and learn. And then all of a sudden, the next thing you know, okay, they're back in the starters mode. So that's my goal, is to really help him become that starter eventually, whether it's here or somewhere else. Trying to make them better and improve them. That's what I get that's where I get my fun from, and that's self-satisfaction there for me. But you mentioned Kendall Lamb. I think, here's another player with a lot of talent, a lot of ability. So you can't have enough of them. I mean, the way the league is right now, boy, I'm telling you, the injuries that can mount in a hurry, you can't have enough good players, So I hear people talk about backups. This guy's a backup. He's just a backup. And it just, I don't know. I just get a little upset because they're all potential starters. They're going to play at some point. And whether it's a draft pick, whether it's Nick Harris, I told Nick the other day, I said, you have to get ready to play now because you just don't know what can happen and what can occur. So there are no red shirts, in the NFL. Yeah. You get yourself prepared. And if you're drafted, you got to play. So that's the name of the game.
I'm glad you brought up Nick Harris because I wanted to ask you about him. We talk with Lance Zierlein a lot, who works for NFL.com. His father obviously was a line coach in the league. And he said the consensus on Nick Harris is that offensive line coaches absolutely loved this guy, loved watching his tape, and that if he were a little bit bigger, he would have been a second or a third round pick. But I think fortunately for us, he wasn't. Now we get him in the fifth round. What did you like about Nick Harris? Because that's what I just kept hearing. Offensive line coaches love this guy.
Yeah, he's tenacious, and he's intelligent. And as we all know, he won the Inspirational Award there up in Washington.
Yep.
For being at the Combine, I was ribbing him, about – I said, you're not quite as big as some of the centers I've had in my career. Mangold and Frederick. I said, he bristled up, talent. So I was glad to see that. I'm sure everybody's giving him a hard time. But then again, you look at centers across our league, and I had one in Washington with Corey Lickensteiger, who's from Ohio, in fact, played at Bowling Green, and I had Austin Ritter, who's with the Browns for a bit. We had him in Washington. Then you look at Kelsey in Philadelphia. So there's places for those guys, with athleticism. So what he doesn't have maybe in a lot of size and bulk, he makes up with a lot of quickness, explosiveness, and athleticism.
And that's what you need in this system, isn't it? Isn't that what you want your linemen to have in this wide zone scheme?
You really do. You've got to have that ability, you have to have that quick twitch and that ability to run off the ball and obviously capture landmarks and get on your angles of departure and make that fit happen. And obviously be able to run your feet and finish. So, yeah, if he can do that and displace defenders right and left, we'll open up some holes.
In your experience, which is obviously vast, what makes a great offensive line? What makes them be greater than the sum of the parts?
Yeah, I always look at it as my brown bag theory. You know, you can put them all in a bag, shake them up, and throw them out. But the ones that really surface to the top are the ones that have character and intelligence. And if they have those two traits, you know, I don't care. You can put them at left guard, then take the guards, put them at tackle. You can move the pieces around, and it won't even phase them. But you really have to have those two traits to do really, really well. And I've been fortunate, really, really lucky to be around some good lines, you know, and that was kind of the common denominator with all of them.
Absolutely. And that's, listen, tough, smart, and accountable. That's what we've heard Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry preach. And that's right, exactly what you want in that line. So certainly, when you think about the offensive line, not a lot of the credit goes there, right? But you allow those who get a lot of the credit to function. And I would imagine you've been on some very, very talented teams. This one's got to be up there for you when you think about Odell and Jarvis and Chubb and Hunt and Austin Hooper and Njoku and Baker Mayfield. This could be a pretty fun year, and a fullback even in there, and Andy Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. I'm excited. I'm so eager to get back to Cleveland and start working again. Yeah, it has, you know, but the main thing is that we connect and we come together, you know, and coming together as a team and gelling and creating that chemistry. The players do that, you know, and, you know, it's not as though the coaches say, well, okay, everybody get together. We're going to have chemistry now. It has to work its own way in. And by and large, when you have smart guys and you have unselfish guys, you know, they're going to do anything and everything they can to make that happen. And as our job as coaches, to point them in the right direction and give them the guidance and the help and the tutelage that they can to succeed.
Now, normally a lot of that chemistry building happens in the locker room. It happens around the facility, and obviously you can't have that. So are you seeing some of that in the Zoom meetings? And I know you're new to Zoom, but now you're an expert on it, clearly, as we're doing this here. But have you seen some of that from the guys? Have you tried to foster an environment that has a little bit more of that collegiality in these things? Yeah,
we're trying. I think when we first started, it wasn't tight or tense, but it was just, you know, you start your meetings and you have a plan to get certain things done, you know, from a system aspect.
Sure.
But the most important thing about it is the chemistry, and it's just so hard because there's so many players I haven't met in person yet.
Right.
And I just want to reach out and shake their hand. Dang, you know, this is hard, you know, to make that connection. So you've got to think of ways of how to connect, and I try to do that by, you know, asking them questions or getting a response or just mentioning their name constantly. I try to go around the room and ask them what they think or anything of that nature, just to stimulate some dialogue. So that's been good. It's starting to loosen up. It's starting to get to a point where guys feel comfortable texting or reaching out or calling. So yeah, we're making strides, and you know, I just got to keep working hard at it, and I've got to earn their respect. Let's face it, you know, I don't care who you are or where you come from. You know, the players don't care. They just want to make sure that you care about them. It does all that other stuff mean a thing. But if you can show the player that you care about them, genuinely care about them, I think that goes a long ways.
Absolutely. And if they can just Google your resume, I think they'll be very interested in the fact that you do care about them. I thank you so much for the time, and I'll leave you with this one. As you've gone through this offseason, you know, first-year head coach Kevin Stefanski, there have been a lot of questions. Is this going to be a disadvantage for our team? And I know you spoke about how he's handled it, what you've seen, but just what have you seen from him and his ability to kind of rally this team and unify this team in these very uncertain times?
Yeah, he's been awesome. I mean, in every respect. Organizationally, communicatively, he's really reached out to everybody, whether it's players, staff, support staff. He's got everybody involved from top to bottom. It was interesting. I'm in on the Zoom team meeting, you know. I'm looking at it like I'm looking at the participants on my Zoom.
Yeah.
Like 140 people or something, you know, like, oh God. And then everybody's involved. And that's a great thing. He involves everybody. And the support staff, the nutritionalists, the strength coaches, personnel is in there, our personnel department. So it's just great that everybody can listen to his message and his vision and communicate that throughout. So there's nobody left out, nobody's exempt, everybody's included. So I like that. I like the inclusiveness. I just love the way he communicates. He's well measured and he's well thought out, and he has a plan for everything. And if he doesn't know, he's, humble enough to say, I got to do this a little bit differently. What do you guys think? So it's really, really positive. I'm happy for him that he's the head coach, and very, very honored to be working for him as an assistant.
Well, we're very honored to have you. Again, thank you so much for the time.
You.
Best to you and your family, and we certainly look forward to getting everybody back together in Cleveland when that is appropriate.
Okay, you bet. Take care of yourself.
Thanks, Coach.